Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda Groeg, and I'm going to be talking to you today about technology evaluation methods and technology decision making. Just to give you a little background about myself, I'm a third grade teacher at La Rosa Elementary, Temple City Unified School District, California. Our district is made up of 614 employees. Of that population, we only have 6 IT technicians. To give you perspective, that's less than one IT person per 100 staff members. Now, that's one of the reasons I'm here to talk to you today. If you're like me, you may find that sometimes it can be hard getting input from technology specialists in order to help make decisions on whether a type of technology is right for your class. But if we could get IT support every time we needed it, it is important that we have the technology evaluation abilities in our skill set since we will be the ones using them to teach our students. After all, the core of educational technology in today's classroom stems from selection of the proper tools and resources. Having this ability can make us more efficient teachers, which helps our students learn better. Today I'm going to show you some tools and techniques to help you evaluate and make better decisions in 5 different areas of educational technology. These areas are hardware, software, learning objects, open source software, and student information systems. In each of these areas, my goal is to try to establish evaluation criteria from various staff perspectives, including the teacher, information technology specialist, administrator, parent, and student. When evaluating educational hardware, I like to follow the general approach of first collecting basic information such as the hardware's manufacturer, model, and performance specifications. From there, I like to gather some of my initial thoughts about the hardware, including the strengths, weaknesses, and recommendations. This serves as a brief, subjective evaluation, should essentially be your own personal first impression of the hardware resource. Gathering the basic information and performing this brief subjective evaluation provides 2 benefits. First, it can be useful information if you need to revisit and reassess the hardware later on. Second, it will become necessary information needed to perform an objective evaluation of the hardware. The objective evaluation is the last step and can be performed by listing all of the most important key aspects that you can see in the hardware and then assigning a concrete score to each aspect. This table is an example of a tool that can be used to perform the first 2 steps of my educational technology hardware evaluation method. As you can see by the contents, the table gathers most of the basic information about the hardware, including the manufacturer, model, listing of peripherals, and also some of the performance specifications associated with the monitor, graphics, sound system, memory, and hard drive. Don't be intimidated if you're not a tech person. Most of this information can be easily found online from the hardware manufacturer's product data sheet or user manual. In these documents, there is always a performance specification section. Once you've gathered all of this information, you can then gather your thoughts on the hardware and make your quick subjective evaluation in the bottom half of the table. This table is an example of a tool that can be used to perform the 3rd step of my educational technology hardware evaluation method, which is the objective evaluation. Once you've performed the information gathering and quick assessment from the previous table, you should probably have a better idea about the hardware in order to perform this objective evaluation. The best way to do this is to start listing all of the most important aspects that you, as an educator, feel that the hardware should have. I provided several that are important for myself in my classroom, but feel free to add more. Once you have listed all of those key items, go through and grade your hardware. The end result is a report card that you can keep for each piece of hardware that makes for easy comparison with other hardware tools. When it comes to software, it seems like almost every day there's a new mobile app or web app being released that can handle some aspect of our daily lives. The trend for software applications in the education field is no different. However, gathering some of the most basic information on software isn't always as easy as flipping to the performance specifications section of the user manual as you would typically do for a piece of hardware. Here you may need to do a little more work up front to perform your initial assessment. My suggestion is to first scan through user manual for a general overview and take it for a quick test run to get some initial thoughts on the software's functionality. I encourage you to document these initial thoughts and also to make a quick judgment call as to whether the software may be a good fit for your classroom. If it passes this first test, you can give the software another run and go deeper into more scrutinizing evaluation using a detailed assessment method. These detailed assessments can then be collected from the most promising software to determine which will have the best use for your classroom. Here is a sample tool that can be used to perform a quick assessment for a potential software application. The basic info is up top, which includes the software name, vendor, and version. After scanning through the user manual and giving your potential software a test run, you will probably be at a point where you can make an initial judgment call on whether the software can have some use in your classroom. You will notice a 1 through 5 scoring system on some of the major categories such as content, documentation, universal application, potential for learning, and technical quality slash usability. On the bottom half of the table are some areas where you can jot down some notes about the software's special features, strengths, and weaknesses. Lastly, at the bottom of the form, you should make your final recommendation on whether the software should qualify as a potential candidate. Well, if you've gotten to this point where you need to use a form like this, then it's probably because you've tested out several software applications and have selected a promising few out of the group. Now it's time to narrow it down to only the best applications for you in your classroom. After all, we are educators and therefore we must do our due diligence before exposing our students to a software application that may end up using on a daily basis. As you can see, I've divided this evaluation tool into three major areas, including usability, functionality, and content. Usability generally relates to how easily a non-tech person could use the program. Functionality generally relates to how practical the software operates during use. Content relates to how appropriate the software's information is for you and your students. As I mentioned previously during our discussion on hardware evaluation, this table is only a start. Feel free to add items or recategorize things as you see fit. Learning objects come in many different forms, especially since technology has become so prevalent in our schools today. In the digital world, they can be animated tutorials, videos, websites, podcasts, and web quests, just to name a few. In general, they are a collection of content, practice items, and assessments that are combined to accomplish a specific learning objective. We see them being used in schools today to either supplement or replace portions of curriculum, and as a result, it is important that we find a way to evaluate them before exposing them to our students. While there is no strict code that they must follow, learning objects can be considered more effective when they are short and concise. Learning objects are also beneficial when they are self-contained, meaning they could be taken either in sequence or independently from one another. Lastly, learning objects can be considered most cost and time effective from an administrative standpoint if they can be reusable in different contexts and purposes. The table you see above is a sample form that can be used to evaluate a learning object for your classroom. It uses a four-tiered scoring system across a variety of criteria. Because of the open-ended nature of learning objects, they can be difficult to evaluate. As a result, the evaluation criteria has been kept very general for ease of application. At the top of the list, you will see some of the aspects that I felt were most important, including presentation content and support of the learning objective. Also, important is how the learning object motivates our students to learn and interact with one another. Further down the list, you will see some of the other desirable traits discussed previously, such as conciseness, reusability, and self-contained nature. My next decision-making tool relates to open source software. The open source software movement has been gaining steam in schools and other institutions as an alternative to dealing with the end user restrictions and expenses associated with closed source or commercial software for school computers and tablets. Closed source software is essentially a program or application that is purchased under a licensing agreement from the publisher. Under this agreement, the end user is typically restricted from modifying the software's functionality or source code to suit their needs. A few common examples are Microsoft Office, Windows operating system, and Adobe Acrobat. Open source software is basically any computer software that is distributed along with its source code available for modification. In other words, the end user or end user's programmer can change the software any way they choose to suit their needs. Some common examples of this are Android and Linux operating system and Firefox and Chrome Web. Along with web browsers and operating systems, the open source movement has found its way into many educational applications, some of which are replacing their closed source counterpart. Some advocates in the educational field say that open source software allows them more flexibility and helps reduce upfront costs. However, opponents say that these benefits are eroded by increased time and expense associated with open source software training, maintenance, and support. As a result, we as educators should carefully review the pros and cons before making a switch to an open source software application. This table gives you a summary of those pros and cons, which should help you make this decision if it ever comes up in your career. When and if your school decides to potentially adopt an open source software application, it is still important to ask a few extra questions that may help determine if the software will be successful in the long run. In addition to the software evaluation tools we used previously, this table contains a set of supplemental questions that will help the educator make a decision on open source software platforms. These questions mainly relate to software service, support, documentation, updates, and time it has been in use. Student information systems. They are arguably the most important aspects of an educational technology infrastructure. These software applications have the ability to handle pretty much any aspect of a school's day-to-day operations. Some of the most common items shown in the flowchart above are attendance, reporting, grading, enrollment, assignments, and the list goes on and on. But each of these functions come with a price tag. Licenses for these software packages are highly customizable and as a result, schools should decide what type of functionality is most appropriate for them. In addition to the functionality, you will need to make sure to select a reputable vendor for your software. After all, it is the student information system that will eventually become the core of your school's operations. Several vendors are shown here, but there are many more. You may think that as a teacher, it's not my job to make these decisions. The administrator should handle this. But this is entirely untrue. You will be one of many who will be using these systems. The checklist you see here is intended to help you and your administrators decide what features you would like to have in a student information system. It's a list of just about every function you could possibly have in an SIS software package. But remember, each of these potential features come with a price tag. So, discuss with your faculty which of these features are really needed. Once you have figured that out, you can include this list as part of a request for proposals that your school can send to potential vendors to obtain cost quotes. The list will also help narrow down the long list of SIS vendors which may not offer some of these software functions that your school will need. Once your school has sent out a request for proposals for a student information system, it's up to staff to then preview the proposals and select the most reputable vendor. Remember, lots of time and money will go into integrating the system into the school's technology infrastructure. So you want to make sure that then the software vendor is going to be there for your school when it needs their support. This table may be a useful resource when it comes time to interview some of the software vendors who submitted proposals for your school's student information system. It's divided into categories of compliance with school needs, customer support, and customization. The chances are that if you don't like the responses that vendors have to some of these questions, then it may be time to disqualify them and move to the next candidate. With so many technology options available today, it's not always practical to go chasing down an IT person to help you decide what's right for your class. I'm hoping it has helped give you some resources that you can use going forward to evaluate tech tools in your classes. I also hope that this helped to give you the confidence needed to make informed decisions regarding technology problems and needs at your school. After all, being able to make these types of informed decisions is what makes us all technology leaders.